I always prided myself on how civilized our divorce was. It was my favorite story to tell friends over a glass of wine. See, you can split up and remain human beings for the sake of the child. We had a perfect 50-50 schedule, polite texts in the parenting chat, and shared photos from Leo's 7th birthday, where David and I stood on either side of our son, smiling like an advertisement for modern, conscious co-parenting. I was an idiot. I didn't realize that my civility was just a convenient screen behind which David was building a scaffold for my life. David was always a master of the facade. An architect by trade, he knew how to create beautiful, reliable-looking structures that were hollow on the inside. In our marriage, this showed in the little things. He could organize a grand surprise for our anniversary, but ignore my requests for help around the house for weeks. He was the fun dad who bought Leo huge Lego sets and took him to amusement parks, while I was the boring mom who forced him to do homework, brush his teeth, and eat broccoli. After the divorce, this dynamic intensified. Leo would return from his dad's overexcited, cranky, and with a backpack full of dirty clothes. "Dad said laundry is women's work," he blurted out once at 6 years old. I called David then, ready to start a scandal. "Clara, you're being paranoid." His voice was velvety, calm. "He's a child. He misunderstood something. Don't look for problems where there aren't any. We agreed. Peace for Leo's sake." And I retreated. I swallowed the resentment because I was afraid of becoming that hysterical ex that women's forums warned me about. I wanted peace. I wanted Leo to have a father. The first real alarm bell rang in October, 2 years after the divorce. Leo came back after a weekend at David's, strangely quiet. He didn't run to hug me like usual. All evening, he avoided eye contact, and when I was tucking him in, he suddenly asked, staring at the ceiling, "Mom, is it true that you're sick?" Everything inside me went cold. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "What do you mean, honey? Do I have a runny nose?" "No. Dad said that you have a wrinkled," he wrinkled his forehead, remembering a difficult word, "unstable psyche, and that you need to take special pills so you don't scream at me." I froze. I had gone to therapy after the divorce, that was true. I took mild anti-anxiety meds for 6 months to cope with the anxiety caused by the collapse of a 10-year marriage. David knew about this. I told him myself in a fit of that same civilized honesty to explain why I sometimes asked him to pick Leo up early due to work deadlines. Now, my trust was being used as a weapon against me, and not just in conversation, but implanted into the head of my 7-year-old. That night, I didn't call David. I realized that talking was useless. I started recalling other little things, how Leo suddenly stopped telling me secrets because Dad said I wouldn't understand anyway, how he started fearing my strictness even though I never physically punished him, how he once asked if we had enough money for food because Dad says you're terrible with finances. I started keeping a diary, not one where you write about feelings, but an operational log. Date, time, what Leo said, what state he returned in. It seemed like paranoia, but the intuition I had stifled for years was now screaming at the top of its lungs. A month later, David struck. It was a Tuesday morning. I was getting Leo ready for school when the doorbell rang. A courier handed me a thick envelope. I opened it in the kitchen while Leo finished his cereal. It was an emergency court motion. David was demanding full, sole custody of Leo with the right to supervise my visits with our son. I read the text and felt the ground slide from under my feet. It was a masterpiece of legal fiction. David took real facts from my life and ran them through a funhouse mirror. My therapy? Proof of a severe mental disorder threatening the child's safety. My freelance job? I'm a graphic designer and I work from home. Unstable income and chaotic lifestyle preventing a proper routine. The fact that I asked him to watch Leo outside the schedule twice in a year due to work deadlines? Systematic neglect of parental duties. But the scariest part was the section Child's Testimony. It stated that Leo was afraid of me, that I screamed at him, locked him in his room, and turned him against his father. I looked at my son, who was currently trying to fish the last marshmallow out of his bowl, and I couldn't breathe. The man I lived with for 10 years didn't just want to take my child, he wanted to destroy me as a person, as a mother. The first hearing was a disaster. My lawyer, a sweet woman who specialized in amicable divorces, was completely unprepared for the bulldozer named David. He had a shark lawyer in a $3,000 suit who acted like he was defending a mafia don, not a father in a family dispute. David sat in the courtroom with an expression of sorrowful dignity, the perfect father, forced to save his son from a mad mother. When I was given the floor, I cried. I tried to explain that it was all lies, that he was manipulating facts. But my tears worked against me. The judge, a tired, middle-aged woman, saw exactly what David had described, a hysterical, unstable woman. And beside her sat a calm, confident man operating with facts. The judge issued a temporary ruling. Leah would move in with his father until the proceedings were over. I was allowed to see my son twice a week for 2 hours in the presence of a social worker. I walked out of the courthouse and vomited right into a decorative flower bed. My child had been taken from me based on lies I had naively provided to my executor. The next 3 months were a hell for which Dante had no circle. My apartment without Leo felt like a crypt. I would go into his room, inhale the scent of his pillow, and howl with pain. But the visits were the worst. I went to a government center with shabby toys and sat under the supervision of a woman with a notepad who wrote down my every word. Leo was not himself at these meetings. He was stiff, looking at me warily as if expecting a trap. "Mom, Dad says you'll get better soon and then we can see each other more often," he told me once, awkwardly rolling a toy car across the table. I wanted to scream, "I'm healthy! It's your dad who's sick!" But I knew the woman with the notepad would record that as aggressive behavior and an attempt to turn the child against the father. So I smiled through the pain and said, "I'm trying very hard, sweetie." I realized my strategy of being good had failed. The system doesn't care about the truth. The system needs evidence. And if David plays dirty, I have to play smarter. I fired my nice lawyer. I found Sarah, a woman recommended to me in a private group for victims of narcissistic abuse. Sarah wasn't nice. She was cynical, sharp, and knew this type of man like the back of her hand. "Clara, forget about justice," she told me at our first meeting, flicking ash into her coffee cup. "We are at war. He is using your son as a hostage and a weapon. Your job is to disarm him. I don't need your tears. I need your receipts, facts, recordings, everything you have." We started digging. I turned my living room into a war room. I pulled up archives of our texts from 10 years ago. I looked for patterns. Here, 5 years ago, I wanted to take professional development courses. David threw a fit that I was abandoning the family for a career. I gave up the courses. A week later, he bought himself a new expensive laptop for work because he is the provider. Here, 3 years ago, we discussed vacation. I wanted the mountains, he wanted the beach. We went to the beach because he convinced me that mountain air was bad for Leo. I found Leo's medical records. There were no contraindications. It was gaslighting stretched over a decade, subtle, barely noticeable, like poisoning with small doses of arsenic. He always made me doubt my own sanity, my desires, my rights. But that was the past. We needed the present. We needed to prove what he was doing to Leo right now. The court appointed a guardian ad litem, or GAL, an independent representative for the child's interests. It was a woman named Mrs. Hoffman. David charmed her in 5 minutes. He welcomed her into his perfect home with cookies he had baked, which I knew he bought at a bakery but transferred to a home container, with Leo sitting on his lap telling her what a great weekend they had. Mrs. Hoffman came to me already prejudiced. She inspected my apartment as if looking for hidden vodka bottles or traces of ritual sacrifice. My nervousness only confirmed her suspicions. Mrs. Hoffman, I told her, trying to keep it together, David is lying. He's turning my son against me. Mrs. Evans, she replied coldly, I see a caring father and a very anxious mother who cannot accept the loss of control. Your hostility towards your ex-husband is harming Leo. I realized she was lost. The system was working against me. David exploited its bugs, overburdened courts, formulaic thinking of social workers, the stereotype of the vengeful ex. I needed something irrefutable, something that couldn't be written off as my anxiety. The idea came to me when I was sorting through Leo's old things that David had deigned to hand over to me in a garbage bag. Among them was his favorite teddy bear, Mr. Rogers. It was old, with a worn nose, but Leo had slept with it since he was 2. David apparently considered it childish trash and didn't notice it ended up in the bag. I knew it was illegal. I knew that if I got caught, I could lose Leo forever and even go to jail. Our state requires 2-party consent for recording, but I was desperate. I bought a tiny digital voice recorder with a sound sensor. I carefully ripped the seam on Mr. Rogers' back, took out some stuffing, and inserted the device. I sewed it back up. The bear became slightly heavier, but outwardly, nothing changed. At the next visit, I brought the bear to Leo. "Look who missed you," I said. Leo's eyes lit up. He grabbed the toy and hugged it tight. "Mr. Rogers, I thought he was lost. Dad said you probably threw him away." "I would never throw him away, sweetie. Take him to Dad's. Let him guard your sleep." I gave him the Trojan horse. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I lived in constant fear that David would find the recorder. I flinched at every phone call. When I saw Leo again, the bear was with him. While my son played at the other end of the room, under the pretext of fixing a backpack strap, I discreetly removed the device and replaced it with a new one. That evening, I sat wearing headphones, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hit the keys on my laptop. The recording was 40 hours long. Mostly silence, Leo sniffing in his sleep, the sound of cartoons. But then I heard it. It was evening, before bed. David's voice, not the velvet baritone he used in public. It was a cold, hissing tone that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Why did you bring that ugly bear?" David asked. "It was a mom gave it to me. I love him." Leo's voice was quiet, scared. "Mom gave it to you so you'd stay small and weak. She doesn't want you to grow up. She wants you to be a mama's boy." "No, Dad." "Don't argue with me. Your mother is sick, Leo. She's dangerous. Remember how she yelled at you for not doing your homework?" "She didn't yell. She just said strictly." "You imagined it. You were scared. She's crazy, Leo. If you stay with her, she'll make you just like her. Do you want to be crazy like Mom?" "No." There were tears in Leo's voice. "Then you must listen to me. We have to protect you from her. Tomorrow, that lady, Mrs. Hoffman, is coming. If she asks, you tell her that Mom scares you, that you don't want to go to her. Understand?" "But I want to go to Mom." "Shut up." The sound of a hand hitting a table or wall. Leo cried out. "You will do what I say, or I will send you to boarding school and you will never see us again. Your mother doesn't love you, Leo. Only I love you. But you have to earn that love." The recording cut off. I ripped off the headphones and ran to the bathroom. I vomited. I sobbed, sitting on the cold tile. I heard my ex-husband psychologically breaking our child, using fear, lies, and threats. He was programming him like a robot. This was it. The proof. The receipt. I called Sarah at 3 a.m. "I have a recording," I croaked. "What recording?" Her voice was sleepy. "From the bear. I recorded him threatening Leo and forcing him to lie to the GAL. Sarah woke up instantly. "You realize that's illegal. We can't use it in court as direct evidence. The judge won't accept it and could sanction you." "I don't care about sanctions. I can't let him stay there. Sarah, he's breaking him." We came up with a plan. It was risky, on the verge of a foul. We couldn't just play the recording in court. We needed to force the system to hear it by bypassing the rules. The final hearing lasted 3 days. It was a meat grinder. David's lawyer methodically destroyed me on cross-examination. He turned every episode of my life inside out. My postpartum depression 7 years ago, proof of chronic instability. My glass of wine on a Friday night, a sign of budding alcoholism. David was magnificent on the stand. He even shed a single manly tear talking about how hard it was saving his son from a beloved but sick woman. Mrs. Hoffman, the GAL, testified in his favor, confirming that Leo expresses fear of his father and a desire to live with his father. On the 3rd day, it was our turn. Sarah was calm as a python. "Your Honor," she said, "we wish to introduce a rebuttal witness. We call Dr. Emily Chen, a child trauma psychologist." Dr. Chen took the stand. She was unlike Mrs. Hoffman. She was dry, academic, and operated only on facts. "Dr. Chen, you conducted an evaluation of Leo Evans. What are your findings?" Sarah asked. "My findings are that the child demonstrates classic signs of severe psychological pressure and induced parental alienation. His statements about his mother are rehearsed phrases, inconsistent with his age and cognitive development. He experiences intense fear, but not of his mother, rather of the consequences of giving the wrong answers." David's lawyer jumped up. "Objection, speculation. What are your findings based on?" And then Sarah made her move. "Your Honor," she said, "Dr. Chen's findings are based on sessions with the child, as well as materials provided by the mother, which Dr. Chen utilized in her clinical evaluation. Under the rules of evidence, an expert is permitted to rely on materials that are typically inadmissible in court if they help form an expert opinion." The judge frowned. "What materials are we talking about?" Sarah pulled out a flash drive. Audio recordings made in the father's home demonstrating a process of active psychological abuse and coaching of the child. "We do not offer this as direct evidence, Your Honor. We offer it as the basis for Dr. Chen's expert opinion." David's lawyer turned purple and started shouting about illegal recording, invasion of privacy, and criminal offenses. The courtroom erupted in noise. The judge banged her gavel. "Silence. I am calling a recess for 30 minutes. Counsel, in my chambers." Those 30 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat in the hallway, hands clasped, praying. I knew the judge could just throw out the evidence right now, fine me, and give Leo to David forever. When they returned, David's face was gray. His mask of confidence had cracked. He looked at me not with pity, but with pure, undiluted hatred. The judge took her seat. She looked furious, but not at me. I listened to a segment of the recording in my chambers to determine its admissibility in the context of expert opinion. The judge said. Her voice was icy. "What I heard goes beyond the bounds of any acceptable parenting behavior. Despite the questionable method of obtaining this recording, the court believes that the interests of the child's safety prevail over the right to privacy in this specific case. I allow Dr. Chen's testimony based on this recording." David jumped up, shouting something. The bailiff sat him back down. We won, but it didn't feel like a movie victory. There were no fanfares or hugs. There was a feeling of immense, crushing relief mixed with horror at what my son had gone through. The judge issued a ruling immediately. Temporary full custody was transferred to me. David was allowed only supervised visitation under strict professional oversight, 2 hours a week. He was ordered to undergo a mandatory course of therapy for anger management and parenting skills. The court also ordered a full psychological evaluation of David. That evening, I picked Leo up from David with the police. David stood on the porch of his perfect house, looking at me. He didn't scream, didn't make a scene. He just said quietly as I walked past with Leo clinging to my hand, "You'll regret this, Clara. You think you won? This is just the beginning." I didn't answer. I hugged my son, who was trembling with fine shivers, and led him to the car. In his backpack still lay Mr. Rogers, the little plush spy who saved his life. After a year, if this were a movie, credits would be rolling now, showing Leo and me running through a field of daisies, happy and healed. In reality, it's more complicated. Leo lives with me. We go to a therapist twice a week. The first months were a nightmare. He screamed at night, wet the bed, feared I would abandon him. He constantly asked, "Am I good? Am I doing everything right? Will Dad be mad?" He's 7 years old and he has PTSD like a war veteran. David broke his basic trust in the world. We are having to reassemble him piece by piece. David goes to supervised visits. He's perfect there. He's calm, polite to the supervisor, brings Leo expensive gifts. He's playing the long game. He waits for me to slip up. He files appeals, buries me in petty lawsuits, tries to exhaust me financially and emotionally. I know my fight isn't over. David is a chronic disease we will have to live with until Leo turns 18. He will never truly leave us alone, because for people like him, losing control is worse than death. But sometimes in the evenings, when Leo falls asleep in his bed, hugging the patched-up Mr. Rogers, I look at him and realize we survived. I was able to protect him when the system couldn't. I stopped being good and became effective. I look at the stack of folders on my desk, my receipts, my evidence, my armor. I am no longer afraid of being the hysterical ex. If protecting my child requires me to have fangs and claws, I will grow them. I will become the monster he painted me as if that's what it takes to keep him away from my son. And I know for sure, peace treaties with terrorists don't work. The only things that work are high walls, secure locks, and irrefutable evidence.